Namaskar everyone. Welcome to day 34 of our 40-day observance. In the holy book of the Hindus, Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna, who is the warrior, he approached Lord Krishna with the question, Lord, the mind is restless like the wind, difficult to control. How can I control this restless mind? Obviously, he couldn't, because he was disturbed by the whole experience of the war in the Mahabharata. Krishna said to him, yes, the mind is difficult to control. He says, but you can. You can. And he gave two important points. He says, with vairagya and abhyas. What is vairagya? Detachment from the senses. If you are caught up in the senses and the elements and the nature, you cannot have a restless mind. You cannot have a peaceful mind if you're caught up in the material world with the senses, sense pleasures, sensory experience. How can you be at peace? You'll be pulled by the horses of the senses. So we need vairagya. Patanjali described it in the Yoga Sutras. Pratyahar. Withdraw the energy from the senses. Withdraw the energy. Take your attention away from them. Don't feed them. That's easy to say, but difficult to do. Because when you sit in the meditation, where does the mind go? Of course, into the world. Before you even know it. And then it moves from one thought to another. So it's restless. Sometimes you don't even see how many thoughts you've entertained. So we need this detachment that is called vairagya. And when you begin to feel a little bit of that, you're resisting the pull of the sensory world. When you begin to feel a little bit of that, he added the next practice, abhyas, practice. Practice. Stay with the practice. Abhyas. I'm focusing today on the importance and the need for practice. So when you come in here and for a little time you meditate, have you meditated enough for the week? Are you going to be sustained by that little period of meditation? How many of you repeat the meditation after the morning? How many of you? How many of you make the attempt in your waking hours to manage a restless mind and stay with the practice? How many of you? Mindfulness. How many of you stay in the mindfulness of how the ego is caught up in the senses? How many of you? You give liberty to the thinking, to the emotion, to the pull of the world. You give liberty. How can you be a yogi? How can you experience the samadhi, the promise of the superconsciousness? How are you going to experience that if you're pulled by the world? So it's necessary to be able to see that you are being pulled. As you're being pulled, some of us we can't see, and I spoke about that seeing. You need to deepen the seeing that you can see when the ego is being pulled. And there is a space of seeing beyond the ego. Remember, the ego is not the chief. The ahankar, it's a phantom in the space. It has no power. It only exists because we have a form. And when the mind is in ignorance, ego is worse. But it's a false boss. Because the true boss is the infinite self. And you know the story of the two birds that I've spoken about in the past. I'm not going to speak about it today, but in the week that is coming. The story is about two birds sitting in a tree. You have a golden bird at the top, unmoving, totally at peace, full of brightness. It's a golden bird. And then you have another bird jumping from branch to branch, tasting the sweet and bitter fruits. Eager for you. The golden bird is the self, the infinite self. So, unless that bird that is moving around begins to turn its attention up to the top of the tree and say, oh my God, look at that bird. And say, I want to be like that bird. The story tells how to be like that bird. Of course, in the story, after a while, the experience of the bitter and sweet fruits doesn't satisfy this jumping bird. It's too restless. So it begins, from its utter disgust with the world, to turn its attention upward and get more interested in the golden bird. And then it begins to jump towards the golden bird. So here I'm telling you the story. It begins to jump towards the golden bird. And every time it makes a jump, it feels better. It feels better. And it gets quite up to the golden bird. And it's thinking now how to go sit with this bird. So when it jumps to go to sit with this bird, guess what happens? It becomes the bird. It becomes the bird. And the two-ness disappears. So it was always that golden bird. Then any ignorance thinking that it was a jumping bird as well. It wasn't. That was false. That was an illusion. That's the Maya. So within you has that golden bird. That is beyond the ego. That is beyond the restless bird. So don't get caught in the restless ego and the seeking for pleasure and power and material possessions. Don't get there, because that's a restless bird. You will never be at peace. Begin to retrace the steps back to the golden bird that is inside. That still part of you. That expansive part of you, which is there. Which is there. That's who you are. You are the infinite I. But that process of going up there requires abhyas. Because it's such a fluctuating world, when you get caught in the fluctuation of the world, you're going to be totally restless. And so you need a safe space to retreat and detach from the senses, pratyahar, detach from the senses, and begin to focus inward. The focus inward, Patanjali call it dharana. Keep the focus inward. And he says the focus might falter, but keep the practice going, the abhyas. Keep the practice going again and again and again. And he says at some point, Patanjali says at some point it's going to become dhyan. Dharana is going to turn into dhyan. Dhyan means an unbroken stream of attention, like what I try to get you in the meditation. Sustained awareness. That's dhyan. And when you get the dhyan right, then you jump into the position of the golden bird. samadhi, super consciousness. So Patanjali calls it the threesome of dhyan, of dharana, dhyan, and samadhi, samyana. So this is where it happens in the practice. But you need to sustain the practice. How often you should practice? You should practice until it becomes a lifestyle. There is no longer practice. Till the practice becomes no practice, it becomes a joy. That's how long you should practice. Because what happens in your infrequent practice is that you build some merit in the practice and then you lose it when you get back into the world. Are you satisfied with this kind of practice? That's not what Sri Krishna spoke about. Abhyas, the constant practice. That's why we repeat mantra continuously, to protect the mind. Man and tra. Man is the activity of the mind. Tra, to protect or to save. So mantra, mantra, mantra. Keeps you in the present moment. That's sadhana. That's abhyas. Some hold the beads so that with the physical body they don't forget, because you have to move the fingers. Some use the breath awareness. Some forms of meditation, so you're totally taken up in breath awareness. And some use just witnessing the play. So whether we choose witnessing, to not get caught, to not label, to judge. Some use the mantra and some use the breath. So when you sit for your practice, you need to do this. So when you're in activity, staying as witness is one of the best. Witness consciousness. When you sit down and you feel the restlessness of the mind, when you close the eyes and you find that the mind is still with the world, mantra, mantra, mantra. And when you begin to feel the magic of the breath, the prana and apana of the breath, then soham, prana apana. So with the in-breath, hum with the out-breath. And you choose a mantra when you're meditating, one that you feel drawn to. Don't choose a mantra because you hear about a mantra. And don't choose a long mantra that you struggle with it. No, choose a mantra that can work with the breath. Om is perfect. Om Guru is perfect. The Guru Gita speaks about Om Guru. Shri Ram, Jai Ram, Jai Jai Ram. It's a beautiful mantra. You can keep that going on and on in the mind. Om Namah Shivaya. But how important practice is. We need to sustain practice. And you have so many idle moments. Don't tell me you don't have. When you're cooking, you're washing, you're cleaning, mantra can be in your mind. Or if you can be so much in oneness with the activity, you don't need a mantra because you are completely absorbed in the present moment with whatever you're doing in expansive awareness. You don't need a mantra. Your attention to activity can hold you there. So we should practice as much as we can. When we forget, sometimes it's okay. But the moment you remember, stay with the practice. Don't give in to laziness, tamas. Don't give in to excess rajas, too excited. Get into the quality of sattva, the sattva guna, peacefulness, tranquility, even-mindedness. Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is saying, samatvam yoga uchate. Samatvam means even-minded and consciousness, equanimity. He says that yoga is equanimity. Samatvam. Yoga uchate. So today we highlight the importance of practice. It's a dynamic universe. You cannot get away from movement and practice. If you try to sit still and you are in tamas and thinking that you are in sattva, you're in big trouble. Life will kick you back into rajas. So don't be in a fake kind of sattva, which is tamas, and think that you are in heaven because you ate and sit to meditate and you're feeling in a sensory heaven because the stomach is filled. Because when the stomach gets empty, the misery will come back. No, you want true sattva, not a fake sattva. Some people smoke and get a high, and they think that's sattva. That's not really sattva. That's tamas. See why we need wisdom in this game? We need wisdom in this play. If we don't have wisdom, we see it as a battle, but the moment we have wisdom, we see it as a play. We see it with the eyes of the divine. Thank you, everyone. Have a blessed Sunday. It's a joy to be with you. Stay in the practice. Stay in the practice. Remember the words of Krishna. Vairagya and Abhyas. Namaskar, everyone. Have a blessed day.